Okay, good morning.
Morning.
Hope everyone had a nice Yom Tov, Yom Tevim, and took
Mm.
inspiration for the whole year, Simcha for the whole year. Okay. We're up to Perek Vov, Iggeres Hateshuva, chapter 6. In Perek Daled, good morning. In Perek Daled, where we had today, some exotic island. Okay. You're on mute. Okay. In Perek Daled, the Alter Rebbe switched gears and we moved on to a different area. And that is after we understand what the mechanics of tshuva, whether that it's not fasting, and how to do tshuva, and when fasting is relevant, and what we do in the place of fasting, and tzedakah, and all that. In Perek Daled, the Alter Rebbe switched gears to start dealing with the actual damage that was done as a result of transgressing the will of the Eibishter. And he started by telling us from the Zohar that tshuva means toshuv hay, to return the hay, to give it back, because as a result of our transgressions, we've separated the hay of the Yud Kei Vav Kei. In order to understand that, he explained to us the idea of what Yud Kei Vav Kei is and how that Yud Kei Vav Kei exists within our neshama. Yud is the Chochma, Hay is the Bina, Vav is bringing it down through the 6 midos, and the last Hay is Malchus, application. And therefore he explained that when we commit a transgression, we've disconnected. Hence he gives us the example of a rope that bit by bit can slowly get severed. And we ended off in chapter 5. One of the questions which he asked at the beginning in chapter 4, which we ended up in chapter 5 as well, is the idea that the Torah tells us that there are certain sins who their punishment is kores, which means cutting off, or it's commonly translated as excision. It means that someone dies by the age of 50 before reaching his 50th birthday. And then there's Misa B'dei Shamayim, and there's death by the hands of heaven, not by the court, which is by the age of 60. And therefore the question is, how come is it that we find that there are many people who committed transgressions whose punishment should have been kores or Misa B'dei Shamayim, and it doesn't happen? Or, in other words, that's a different version of the common question of why do good things happen to bad people, right? This is a more sophisticated version of the same question, okay? If it is, as it says in Torah, that it's in Chumash, that there's 50 and there's 60, then why don't we see that anymore? So the Alter Rebbe is going to start explaining to us here in chapter 5 that there's a major change in Jewish history that was from the time when the Beis Hamikdash stood to the time when the Beis Hamikdash is no longer standing. And that change caused fundamental differences in many, many things on a spiritual level, not just on a physical level, but on a spiritual level as well, including this 50 and 60 punishments and so on. So let's read it inside. We're Perek Vov, which is on page 190 in the standard print of the Tanya at the bottom of the page. Okay. However, this. What this? This, when we mentioned about the punishments and the retribution that Hashem gives, which we said is not necessarily a punishment, but that's a cleansing, etc. But a kapora, this applied when Bizman Shai Yisrael b'madrega eliyona. This is all when Yisrael were on a madrega eliyona on a very high level. When was that? When the Shechina lived amongst Yisrael in the Beis Hamikdash. So then the Elokus was revealed. You could see and appreciate, it was tangible even, right? Mishnah Perkei Avos says that if you went and visited the Beis Hamikdash, you would witness 10 miracles. Every day. You went there and you saw 10 miracles happening. The mitzvah was to come on the 3 Yom Tevim to visit Yerushalayim. It was liros velerois, to see and be seen. To be seen by God and to see God. There was open revelations of Elokus there. Therefore, at that time, they didn't receive energy for their bodies, rak al the nefesh elokis, from any other source other than from the nefesh elokis levada. The nefesh elokis at that time of high spiritual connection, their energy came from the nefesh elokis alone, exclusively. Not just from the nefesh elokis, but mibchinas pnimius hashefa, from the innermost source of the flow of energy. Top of the page, shemashpia in seif baruch Hu, that the in seif, the infinite light of God, gives. Shem Havaya Baruch Hu, directly through the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei of the Eibishter, from the right. So it was a very high and spiritual state, straight from Shem Havaya Baruch Hu. So therefore, if somebody went and committed an avera, in other words, he transgressed and therefore caused direct damage to this link, to this connection which comes from Shem Havaya, from the Ein Seif, which is went through the process of Yud Kei Vav Kei, then it was a natural result was that the person got cut off bit by bit, slowly but surely, until eventually they had cut it. So whatever it was very straightforward. However, after they fell from this high level, and they caused b'maseim, with their actions, with their deeds, they caused what he calls here the secret of Golus Hashchina, of the exile of the Shechina. In other words, it's a mystery. What does it mean that the Shechina is in exile, as in Golus, as a result of the Yidden's misbehavior in the times of the Beis Hamikdash? So it's not just that the Bnei Yisrael went into Golus, but the Eibishter also went into a Golus. What does that mean? So he says, Gormu Masem Soid, it's a secret. We don't know. We don't understand it of the Golus of the Shechina. But one thing we do know, that changed the rules. The whole game changed as a result of the Golus of the Shechina. If, until the Golus of the Shechina, we had a direct relationship, it was very clear with Yud Kei Vav Kei, a direct relationship and clear relationship with Yud Kei Vav Kei, all of that changed as a result of us descending or falling from our madrega, and they caused b'maseim, with their deeds, seid Golus Hashchina. What does that mean? How do we know that? So he says, as it's written in Pasuk in Yeshaya, ubepisheichem, through your pesha, through your sins, shulcha imchem, your mother was banished. Who's the mother? The mother, of course, is the Shechina. The Shechina is referred to as the mother of Knesset Yisrael. The Shechina, which we know is the level of Malchus of Atzilus. So as a result of Pisheichem, Shulcha Imchem, your mother, has been sent into exile. So we know that there is such a thing as Shechina and Golus. We don't understand necessarily. It's a Seid, he says, it's the Seid of Golus HaShechina, but that it happened, that's a reality, that's a fact, it's a posuk. What does it mean? What does it mean that the Shechina went into Golus? We may not understand why, but we can try and understand what that means and the results of that. The Hainu, Sheyordo Hashpoas Prinas Heitato Anal. If the Shechina is, as we said, is the Malchus of Yud Kei Vav Kei, as we said earlier, Malchus is the level that comes down into the world, which we are now calling Shechina, which, right? Sheyordo Hashpoas Prinas Heitato Anal. That the hashpah, the flow of benevolence, the flow of energy from the lower hay, yorda, it descended, it came down. And it descended and came down from one madrega to the next madrega, from one level to the next level, lemata mata, all the way down, very far down. You know how far it came down, to the point where what started off in Yud, and then into Hey, and then into Vav, and into the Hey, which is the Shechina, came and fell down into even the 10 spheres of Noiga. Remember our good friend Noiga, first chapter of Tanya, Klippas Noiga. Over there, the Alter Rebbe introduced us to the concept of the 3 unclean klippas, Shalosh Klippas Atmeis, and also introduced us to Klippas Nega. Klippas Nega is what you would call the Parav, side of the world. There's the side of the world which is outright forbidden, and that gets its energy from what's known as the three unclean klippas, shalosh klippas atmeis. And then there's klippas nega. Nega is that level of its klippa, meaning it isn't holy, but it has the potential for holiness. It's a mixture of good and bad. The majority of the world that we live in is klippas nega. Zoom is klippas nega. Computer technology is klippas nega. And our job is to be able to transform klippas nega into kedusha. So he's saying that this shechina, the golos of the shechina, is that it descended all the way down into the hay of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the hay tata, that lower level of hay, the second hay, came down all the way into the Yud Sfiris of Nega. And what is the significance of that? The Yud Sfiris of Nega, Hamashpia is Shefa V'chayus, they transmit the flow of energy and the chayus of the energy, Al Dei HaMazolis, through the planets, and all the hosts of the heaven, and all of the heavenly ministers or angels that are on top of them.
Rabbi Kevin, can I just ask a question? In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, there was no klippas noiga?
Okay, the Alter Rebbe here is talking, it's a very good question. I thought the question would arise earlier. He's saying that in time of the, he said to us earlier, at the bottom of the page, 2 lines on the bottom, he says, that's even a better question. They're both the same thing. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, everybody received only from Nefesh Elikis. So in that case, how did they go? How did they start sinning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? So I think the Alter Rebbe is here talking in general terms. This is the situation. Of course, there was Klippas Nega. Klippas Nega was from the beginning of the world. We're saying over here is that the Golos of the Shechina, that it fell down into Klippas Nega, it's no longer. It's in Golos. It's no longer accessible in Kedusha anymore.
What is that? I don't understand the difference. I don't understand. It always came down all the way down into the world. If the Klippas Nega was there, it always was there, no?
The difference between the world now and the world of the time of the Beis Hamikdash. Take, for example, the time of the Beis Hamikdash, the climb, the height of spirituality in the time of the Beis Hamikdash was the times of Shlomo HaMelech. So the times of Shlomo HaMelech, for example, everybody, the whole world knew and understood and was aware of Elikus. So everybody came to Shlomo HaMelech, right? Tanakh tells us, Malkas Sheva, everybody came to give honor to Shlomo HaMelech and to come to the Beis Hamikdash. So Elikus was revealed. Of course, the whole world is Klippas Nega. That's the way they created the world from day one. But at that time, the time of the Beis Hamikdash, it was obvious Elikus. What happened to that obvious Elikus? That is now gone, and it's only in Klippas Nega. So when you wake up this morning and you look out the window, you don't see Elikus. What do you see? You see Klippas Nega, or worse. Right? So that's what it means. It means that today, the way we are able to connect with Elikus is on the main through Klippas Nega. The food that we eat, we don't see the Elikus that's in it overtly. We believe and we understand that there's a Elikus in it through the Klippas Nega. The time of the Beis Hamikdash, they were able to connect directly with Elikus because the food that they ate, for example, the karbonis, was direct from Elikus. The food that you ate had already truma and meiser and everything. So this was all kosher, it was holy. You're married to a kohen. So the Kahanim ate food that was holy food. That's a likus. And even the regular people, their food became holy as a result of taking off the matanos, the gifts that were given to the Kahanim and the Levim and Truma and Meiser, etc. So a likus was a much more reality. Was a reality, not much more. Was a reality. Today, likus is not so much. Is a, you know, the expression is brought. The likus is beischachus and elamis is begilu. We see the world is in a revealed way, and we have to understand and discover Elikus. Part the curtain of Klippas Nega and discover Elikus. But it's not a natural, instinctive thing. And that's the difference. Of course, there was Klippas Nega then as well, but then Elikus was the dominant power and the obvious power. While Golos Ashchina means that the Eibishter went into Golos, we don't see him anymore. All we see is Nega. I think that's the answer to the question.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So that's the Golos. Thank you. That's a good question. That's a good. That's the goals of the Shekhinah. I mean, just to connect this with this week's parsha, there's a beautiful sikha from the Rebbe in Likutei Sichos where he says, he explains the first Rashi. And just to take 2 minutes just to explain, because it's very relevant to what we're discussing over here. The Rebbe says that in every, the first Rashi in Chumash must obviously have in it the whole purpose of what the whole Torah is all about. Rashi's coming to explain the Torah, so therefore, at the very beginning, in his first Rashi, he must encapsulate the message of the whole Torah. What's the whole first Rashi all about? That Bnei Yisrael were accused of conquering the land. The simple meaning, simple pshat is, the Rashi says, why does the Torah have to begin from Bereshit? It should have started from the first mitzvah. Torah is not a storybook. And the answer is because the nations of the world are going to come and claim that Bnei Yisrael stole the land of Israel from the other nations of the world. So therefore, they started the Torah from Bereshit to tell everybody that the Eibishter created the world. He gave it to the other nations, and he chose at some point to give it back to the Yidden, and therefore the land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael, belongs to Am Yisrael. That's a simple meaning. But the Rebbe explains that what's the message over here, really? In this first Rashi is the whole mission statement of what Torah and Yiddishkeit and mitzvahs are all about. That our job is what? To conquer the world. What does that mean, to conquer the world? To turn the world into Eretz Yisrael. What does Eretz Yisrael mean? He said, brings from the Medrash that why is it called Eretz Yisrael? Eretz is because it comes from the word Rotzain, desire, meaning Ritzain Kaina, a land that wants to fulfill the desire of the creator, of the Eibishter, to transform the world into a place where the world becomes an Eretz to fulfill the Rotzain of the Eibishter, to transform Klippas Nega into Kedusha. That's Yisrael, as opposed to the name Yaakov. Yaakov is the heel. That's the day-to-day work of going through the world and transforming the world. Yaakov transformed the world into Yisrael. This is exactly this idea that we're saying over here. We're going to soon see the upside of this Golus Hashchina is going to be that we are now have an opportunity to be able to achieve something which was not achievable then, of making the Dir B'Tachtenim, of transforming the world into a dwelling place in the Eibishter. This is all the upside of Golus. But that's not what he's talking about at the moment. But when we're saying over here that it came down in Slapshin, the Yud Sfiris of Nega, that has now become that is our mission. That's what it's all about. So when they accuse, so he says over there even better. This is not just the Goyim. Some Yidden also feel this way. That we have to be very separated from the world because the world is not a good place. They don't understand the nuanced difference between the three unclean klippas and klippas nega. So everything is forbidden. So we have to be separate. We have to make walls around us. We ban technology. We ban this. We ban that because it's all not kosher. And the Rebbe says that no. Based on what the Rebbe said earlier in Tanya, this is kol ha'odam v'tachlis b'riyosei. This is what we're all about. The whole mission of Am Yisrael is to deal with klippas nega and transform it to Kedusha. That is the first Rashi. We have to conquer the world. So we're being accused that it's supposed to be that, what do you mean? They should create the word Gashmis and Ruchnis and keep the two separate, what you call in America separation of church and state. And Rashi is telling us, through the eyes of Chassidus, that no, there's no separation. In fact, our job is lichvesh, to conquer the world. Yes, to conquer the world with holiness, with spirituality, to reveal a likus in the world. That's going to be the reality when Mashiach comes, and we have to be doing that all beforehand as well. So therefore, one of the upsides of this is that the direct punishment no longer exists because the Golos, Shechina is in Golos. So even if someone may have caused damage to the Yud Kei Vav Kei connection to that rope, the punishment won't happen. But as he'll tell us, let's read it inside. Let's read again from the Hainu. No, we read to the top of the page again. However, after they descended from their level, and they fell from the level of the they caused through the deeds Seid Golos Hashchina. This mystery of the Golos of Shechina, as it's written, that with your sins, your mother has been sent into Golos. Meaning, what's the mother? The Shechina. The Hainu, sheyordo hashpa b'chinas hei tato hanal. The hashpa of this lower hay of Yud Kei Vav Kei fell down. And then it nishtal descended down from one level to the next, lamata mata to very low, until the hashpah from the hay, from the shechina, from this malchus of Atzilus, came down to the Yud Svidus of Nega, and Mashpia Shefa V'chayos, which them, the 10 Svidus of Nega, they are the ones who are Mashpia, who transmit the Shefa, the flow of energy. How? Through the natural means. The Mazolos, Cholsoa Shemaim, the sun, the moon, all of the normal natural order of things, the way the world works. No longer is the Eibishter running the world directly, so to speak, overtly. The Eibishter is running the world, but it's no longer in a revealed way. He now, as a result of the Golos Hashchina, it goes through what we call nature, the Mazolos, the planets, and so on. V'hasorim shalaleim, and the ministering angels which are upon them. L'kol hachai hagashmi shemelam hazet, any living thing, any living physical thing which exists in this world. And not just the living things, but gam l'kol hatzemeach, and also to every plant, to every growing thing.
Remy, so what I still don't understand the difference from before and surely all this existed before. Maybe it wasn't so revealed, but
before the Eibishter's what's the word I'm looking for? Before the Golos Hashchina, the Eibishter was directly involved with the world. After the Golos Hashchina, the Eibishter is in Golos, where it seems that he is not directly running the world.
like as if
No
he's
longer
with
overt. It's no longer overt. For example, another example, right? We said, but when do we start actually asking for rain? So now he said, they started asking for rain on Zayin Chesed, right? They will start. Now, why didn't they start with Zayin Chesed? Why did they wait 2 weeks from Shmini Atzeres?
well, so everybody shouldn't get wet.
Oh, in other words, what does that imply? That it's obvious. You ask for rain, you're going to get rain. That doesn't work anymore, does it?
Oh, I don't know.
Huh?
I'm not sure.
No, that's just a simple example. That means that in times of the Beis Hamikdash, if they pushed the button, it started raining. Simple as that. Straightforward. So because of that, we wait 2 weeks so that the people should get home without getting wet. Right? Today, there are those who say you can ask as much as you want. Prayer doesn't help. That's the Golos of the Shechina. That it's no longer a direct and open and revealed cause and effect. You can't necessarily link them. So people of faith, so to speak, right? That's the whole challenge of today, to be able to recognize the likus, to be able to appreciate that Eibishter is running the world, even though we don't directly see it, right? That's the challenge, and that is the fundamental difference between before Golos Hashchina and after Golos Hashchina. That's what I said earlier.
But all these channels existed beforehand. All the obviously all the ways that he reaches us now, or we reach him, were all there before. The Yud Sfiras.
Oh yeah, everything was there, but it didn't have to go through the Mazolos, for example. It didn't have to go through all that. If there was a time, if the Eibishter wasn't happy with the people, then he made it very well known to them. There were Nevi'im who were telling them that he's not happy. If a pandemic happened, they had Nevi'im to tell them what it's all about. There's no Nevi'im today. The first few weeks, there was still some Chachamim who could give reasons. They thought they knew why it's happening. 7, 8 months later, where have all these wise guys gone? Because anybody with Kaseichel knows that I don't know. So this is Golos Hashchina.
We have to search for him.
There's no question. But why and what and how and so on, nobody knows. So that's an example of Golos Hashchina. So yes, the Yutzfilis existed before, but the Eibishter's running of the world was not through everything else. It was direct the Eibishter. You understand?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, look, any of the stories in Tanakh is directly the Eibishter. So there was a direct relationship, direct, open, revealed connection, work and result, tit for tat, etc. It was very obvious and clear.
I
Well-
guess for some people, I guess for, I mean, when Rebbe would say something, he would see it very clearly.
Oh, a tzaddik and a novi is very different. We don't have them today openly. Of course. So when the Rebbe was able to say something, he knew exactly what he was talking about. That's why he's the Rebbe. Not so that's why it says in the Zohar that for the tzaddikim there was no Golus Hashchina. Right? The Rebbe
So I
mentioned-
guess the more bitachon you have, the more you will see that.
there was no need for bitachon, so to speak. It was obvious.
Right.
It was obvious.
Yeah. Yes.
Bitachon means
Okay.
trust, right? Of course, they trusted that they had to have bitachon then too. But the point is that it was very clear. It was a much more direct relationship with the Eibishter, which we don't even begin to appreciate today. You had a problem. You went to the Novi. The Alter Rebbe, we just had it in Chitas and Tanya last week, where the Alter Rebbe complains why people are coming to him with the stuff that you should really be going to a Novi. When you went to the problem, you went to the Navi, and the Navi would tell you what to do. He'd ask Nevuah. You went to the Urim V'Tumim, to the Kohen Gadol. Right? These are fundamental changes. Golus Hashchina is a major change in the way the Eibishter relates to the world. And one of those changes, as what he's getting, the reason he got into this discussion is the change between no longer is there the death at Kores of 50 and at 60 of Misa B'dei Shemayim. But here he's explaining to us how that change happened. So the Shechina, the Likus is no longer direct, but rather the Shechina is in Golos, and it goes down the Shtalshim Madregel till it goes to the Mazolis and the Sorim Shalem, the Kol Achai Hagashmi Shebel Mazev, Gam L'Chol HaTzemeach, and also to all Tzemeach, to all of the plant world. How do we know that? K'maimer Hazal, as the Gemara tells us, Ein Lach Eisev Milamata She'ein Le Mazel V'chulu. The Gemara says that in Eisev there's no blade of grass that doesn't have a malach up in the heavens who doesn't make boy, who claps him, who hits him and tells him gadel, grow. In other words, each blade of grass has an individual spiritual root and source which is responsible for that blade of grass. So again, the Eibishter is not directly involved, but he's giving it over to the Sar, to the angel, the malach, whoever it is, that's in charge of that individual blade of grass. The point being that the Eibishter, from this perspective, is no longer directly involved in the day-to-day. Again, I'm being very cautious here because the Eibishter runs everything. Nothing can happen without him. But the open and revealed direction and running of the world is no longer from the Eibishter. We don't see that anymore. It goes through various other channels. And as a result of that, we're right after the dot over here. V'ozai yochel gam achreita. When that happens, then the sinner, Pesha Yisrael, and the intentional sinner amongst Yisrael is able, yochel, lekabel chayes legufam, to receive energy for their bodies, v'nafsham, and for the nafsham abamis, like any other creature. There's no longer a problem that they've transgressed so much that they've disconnected from God, disconnected, unplugged from the source of energy. Because there's no more unplugged. Because there's a new source of energy now, through the klippa. So therefore, even the sinner is able to get chayas from like any other Baal Chai Mamash, because of, as the Pasuk says, Nimshal kabehemes nidmu. That Pasuk in Tillim, right? Nimshal kabehemes nidmu. We're likened, Nimshal, we're like behemoths, like animal, nidmu, similar. What's the deeper meaning of that? That we are able to receive our chayas just like the animals receive the chayas, just as they exist. So too, we're able to exist. And therefore the rules of the old rules of the game no longer apply. In fact, not just are we like animals, but v'adrabah. Not only is it possible for someone who transgresses to receive chayus from klipa, like animals and other living things do. But in fact, on the contrary, we can receive it b'yeses eis v'yeses, even more so than them. Why? Al pi mavur mizoyar hakodesh pashas pkude. Because, like he explains in the Zohar, shekol shefa v'chayus hanishpois la'odam atachtin, says the Zohar, that all of the flow of chayus that is granted nishpois to the odom, to the person, to odam atachtin, to a human being. What type of energy? B'shov v'rega she'is hara b'einei Hashem, at that moment, at that instant, when a person is not doing the will of the Eibishter, he's doing bad in the eyes of Hashem. B'maisa or b'dibur or b'hura avera, whether it may be in deed, in action, or dibur, or in speech, or in hirhuri avera, thoughts of sin. In other words, using one of the three garments, levushim of the soul. Where are they getting the energy at that moment? Everything comes from the hecholos of Sitra Achra, Muvarim Shom B'Zohar HaKadosh, as explained there in Zohar HaKadosh. Very simple example, a modern example of technology today. Your phones, the way it works today is that as soon as you walk into your house, when you're outside, your phone is on 4G, let's say. And then when you walk into your house and you're registered onto your Wi-Fi, it automatically transfers to Wi-Fi. Right? And if you go into Tesco, if you've registered with them, then it'll automatically go to their Wi-Fi. In other words, we're constantly switching sources of signals for our phones or computers, etc., for all the portable devices. Right? You understand what I'm saying? Right? Sometimes it has to go through your data, your 4G, which you're paying for, and sometimes you get it through your Wi-Fi, which is from your telephone bill, so you don't pay for any data. Right? The sources of energy, the sources of the signal changes. He says the same thing happens over here. When a person is involved in chas v'shalom, going against the Eibishter's will, whether it's in machshava or in dibur or in ma'isa, at that instant when that's happening, b'shov v'rega, that moment that the person is behaving in a way which the Eibishter, which is bad, the ra b'einei Hashem, then hakel nishpalei meichol hasitra achra. Then where's he? Why isn't he zapped right then and there? Because he's getting his energy from the cholos of Sitra Achra, which Mevorim Shom B'Zohar HaKadosh, which the Zohar explains over there. So there is no longer, again, to repeat ourselves, that direct cause and effect in our relationship with the Eibishter does not anymore happen because of Golos HaShechina. In other words, some will say that the reason is because the Eibishter is very patient. Erech HaPayim. From here, what the Alter Rebbe is telling us here, based on the Zohar, it's nothing to do with the Eibishter's patience, but rather it's to do that the chayas of the Eibishter, which has now gone into Golos, there's a level of Elikus, the Hey Tato, to be specific, which has gone into Golos, and that now is the source of energy for all of Klippa and Sitra Achra. And when I am involved in something which is directly connected with Klippa and Sitra Achra, that's where I'm getting my energy from at that moment. And therefore, as the Alter Rebbe continues, v'ha'adam hu bal b'chira, and a human being, right? The next sentence, just past half the page, after the dot. V'ha'adam hu bal b'chira, and a person is given free choice. Im lekabel hashpasa me'echolos hasitra achra, if he should receive his ashpa, his flow of energy from the chambers of Sitra Achra, or oy me'echolos hakdusha, or from the chambers of kedusha. The chambers of Kedusha, from which comes down all the good thoughts and the good deeds and the good speech, that is all energized by Hecholis of Kedusha. And it's up to me where I'm now going to get my energy from. If I choose to do what the Eibishter wants, then I will get, at that moment, at that time, I'll get my energy from the Hecholis of Kedusha. If not, then I'm getting it from the Hecholis of Klippa. So when our thoughts, speech, and action are wholesome and are proper and the way they should be, or even holy, then we're getting from Kedusha. When the thought, speech, and action are doing involved or doing evil things or forbidden things, then at that time he's receiving it from the klipa, from Sitra Achra. Because the Eibusha gave us free choice, because the Pasuk says, one opposite the other, also Lekim did Hashem make. So that every manifestation of Kedusha has, in order to keep the balance, in order to keep the free choice, the Eibusha made an equal opposite manifestation of Klippa as well. Yeah? Okay. Veicholis Hasitra Achra. Where do they get it from? We're saying that we get it from the chambers of Sitra Achra. He quotes from the Zohar. Where do they get their energy from? You turn on your tap. Where does the water come from? You ever wonder? I don't know about Manchester. In Liverpool, the water comes from reservoirs in North Wales. I don't know where Manchester gets the water from the Pennines. Now, the water companies have the option in times if something happens, there's an emergency, pipes break, they can divert water from somewhere else so that people in Manchester should be able to have water because something happened to the regular water source, a pipe broke, whatever it is. So the water can come from somewhere else. So when I'm doing something the way the Eibusha wants, I'm getting it from the Chelos of Kedusha, the energy. If Chas v'Shalom not, I'm getting it from the Chelos of Sitra Achra, of the other side. Where do they get it?
Sorry, can I just ask you, if somebody's a Sadiq Gamor, then are they continually getting it from the place? I mean, can they almost be like it used to be, going back to when there was, before the Golus of the Shekhinah, if they're a Sadiq Gamor?
If you remember, we learned this together in Perek Lamed Aleph, if I remember correctly. Let me check here. No, maybe it was Lamed or Chavtes. 1 second, and I'll remind you the answer to your question. Where did it go? Remember we said then, just 1 second here. This page is a very thin paper, the Chitas. Yeah. In Perek Chavtes, he told us very clear that the tzaddik is someone who only is nefesh elokis. He has no nefesh abamis running him. His whole life is only, his whole energy and everything is only for the nefesh elokis. We brought the example of Hillel. The tzaddik also has to eat, so Hillel had to excuse himself from his students. He says, I got to go and deal with this poor widow.
Yeah.
Remember? So they came and they saw him eating a sandwich. What is this? You told us you're going to feed a poor lady, a poor nefesh aluva. So he says, yeah, I'm talking about my nefesh abamis, my body. The body can't be neglected. He didn't eat because he wanted to eat, because the body needs to be fed, right? So yes, the tzaddik is completely energized only from Kedusha, only from Elokus, only from the Eibusha. All the rest of us, it's this constant switch from 4G to Wi-Fi, back and forth.
That's something for us to aim for then.
Well, the Alter Rebbe told us we shouldn't nothing to aim for that because we're not going to achieve that, and it's not expected of us. So therefore, not to first.
Right. Okay. I understand.
Remember, he said not even. It's all fantasy, and it's not good to live a life of fantasy.
Okay.
That's not. It's not expected of us. The Eibusha didn't create us that he wants us. So the mission isn't that we should all. That will be when Mashiach comes. It will be only Hashem Echad Shema Echad. Bayemahu. That'll be only then. Till then,
But it's easier, isn't it, to operate like that because there's a complete clarity, absolute clarity. That's much easier.
Of course it is, and that's how the angels in heaven operate. For that, he didn't have to create a world. He had that already.
Thank you.
Creatures that easily operate with an open and revealed God with no temptation and therefore no need for free choice, he had already before he created the world. And even in the creation of this world, it's only the humans that he gave that free choice. Free choice is godly. No other creature has that. And with that free choice, we have the option, so we have a balance, so fine. That's why we have a Yom Kippur, that's why we do Tshuva, that's why this is what the Alter Rebbe tells us mainly in the first part of Tanya. That's how we're supposed to deal with the world. We deal with Klipas Nega. It's very important to understand the differentiation, and that's why he says it right at the beginning of Tanya, the difference between Klippas Nega and the others. And the goal is, yes, to deal with Klippas Nega and transform the Klippas Nega to Kedusha. Okay. So where do these chambers of Sitracha receive their energy for what? Who's their supplier? When I'm doing what I shouldn't be doing, I'm getting it from the Checholos of Sitracha. Where do they get it from? They receive their and their nurture and their chayus. From the slapshus, from the clothing of the ishtalshalos, the descent of the shefa of the flow of the yud sfiris of nega, from the 10 sfiris of nega, which we mentioned earlier. Haklula mebchinas tevera, nega, which is incorporated of good and evil, or mebchinas eitzadas, the level of eitzadas, kinedel yedechein, as is known to those knowledgeable in chokhmah nistora, the hidden wisdom, the Kabbalah. The Alter Rebbe quoted the same eitzadas, if I remember correctly, at the beginning of Tanya, at the end of Perik. Was it the end of Perik Vov or something like that? And also he refers to this as well. It's eitzadas, this week's parsha. Right? The eitzadas was only forbidden for 3 hours. So what was it? After 3 hours, it would have been okay. Shabbos would have come in, and then the fruit would have been permissible. It was klippas. It was then, for those few hours, it was shalosh klippas atmeis. Right? Just 1 second, where did it go? Anyway, at the end of one of those prokim over there. Don't remember, one of those Vov Zayin or Ches. In any case, he mentions the same thing over there. So the Hechalos HaSitrachra receive their chayas from the Yud Sfiris of Nega. The Yud Sfiris of Nega can go either way. And therefore, that is the paper trail of what happens and how we receive energy when we are perhaps not behaving the way the Eibishter wants us to behave. There's no immediate retribution. The reason is because the Shechina is in Golos, the Heit Tator is in Golos, and that goes into Golos into the 10 Sfiris of Nega. The 10 Sfiris of Nega can then go either way into the Sitra Achra or not, and that's what gives us energy depending on what we are then doing. So if I'm just sitting around, I'm not doing something that's prohibited. In other words, even sitting around is in a permissible way. Sitting around is forbidden, perhaps, because I should be, a man at least has the mitzvah of learning Torah constantly, so he can't just be sitting around. But if there's a situation where we're doing something which is neither holy nor forbidden, then at that moment we're receiving our chayas from the klippas nega. When I'm doing something that's outright forbidden, I'm receiving my energy from the unclean klippas, sitrachana, the hecholis of sitracha, as we call them here, the chambers of the sitrachana, the other side, the antithesis of holiness. And when I'm doing something which is what the Eibishter wants me to do, I'm receiving my energy at that time, at that moment, or at that time from the hecholis of kedusha. And therefore, if I choose, it's constantly switching. Okay. Now he's going to continue what we started saying, that in fact we, because we're humans and we have free choice, we can rise higher than all of the other all the other creations, but sadly that also gives us the opportunity to be able to fall even lower than them. Yaakov Chevel Nachalosik Siv. So again, the pasuk that we mentioned last week, that Yaakov is Chevel Nachalosik. The pasuk says that Yaakov is the rope of Hashem's heritage. What does that mean? Al derech mashal. This would be, by way of example, k'mei hachevel, like a rope. Sheresh echad l'maylo, v'resh hasheni l'matam. Top end of the rope is above. The lower end is below. If a person is going to pull at the lower end of the rope, Yenanea, he'll shake the so if he shakes it, the top will also shake, and if he pulls it, it'll be drawn after it. You'll pull it down, you'll pull it to wherever the other end of the rope is. As far as it can be pulled. So you pull one end of a string, then the other end is going to come, right? So that's the example that the pasuk says regarding the connection of Yaakov with the Eibishter, meaning Yidden. Yaakov and the Chevel Nachalasa. Remember, we said the first half of the pasuk we already analyzed. The first half of the pasuk was Chelek Hashem Amay, Chelek Havaya Amay, that we, his nation, is a Chelek of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Remember that we did in Perek Dalet, and from that we started learning that the way the Yud Kei Vav Kei works, that's the way the Neshama works. The second half of the pasuk is that it's like a rope, and therefore wherever we go, whatever we do, we're schlepping the Yud Kei Vav Kei with us. Hence, when we commit something that we shouldn't be doing, we're taking the Yud Kei Vav Kei and schlepping it down into Golos. As he says now. The same exact analogy, the way it works with the rope, the same thing. Mamash is the neshama of a person, in the source and root of the neshama, which is where? Where is the source and root of the neshama? From Heitata. Knesset Yisrael is referred to as the Shechina. Knesset Yisrael is the source where all the neshamas come from. So he says, from the above mentioned Heitata, the lower Hey. That's where the neshama comes from. And therefore, through one's evil deeds, he draws down, he schleps down, hashpa'asa, the flow of energy, the chayos from the Hey. How? Through one's bad deeds and thoughts even. And where does he schlep them? Where does the person schlep them to? Top of the page. Down into the chambers of Sitra Achra. From where he's having the thoughts, the evil thoughts and deeds and words, etc. Who, in other words, here he's going a step further, explaining to us, we said, where does the Hecholis get it from the Yud Sfiras of Nega? But how do the Hecholis get it? Who's allowing, how is, the Eibishter doesn't want them to get his energy. So who's feeding, who's opening up the pipe to allow energy from the Eibishter, from the Yud Hecholis of Nega into the Hecholis of Sitra Achra? That's you and I, sadly. Well, not us, we're talking about other people. That's those people who behave the way they misbehave, right? What was the word he used here? That when a person goes against the will of the Eibishter, he's through Ma'asav Haron and Machshav, he's schlepping it down into the Hecholis of Sitra Achra, so to speak. And then the person himself becomes a benefactor of that energy from the Hecholis of Sitra Achra, and that's what energizes the person's negative or forbidden thought, speech, and action. And therefore, since it's the person himself that's the one that's the supplier, so here we've come, the paper trail goes back now. So who's the one that's supplying the energy to the Hecholis of Sitra Achra, which then energize the negative deeds? The person himself. The person himself is the supplier of that energy. So it's a cycle, right? And therefore he says, since he is the one that's bringing down this hashpa, therefore the person himself is the one who is receiving the chelik bereish, meaning he gets the first pick. He's the one that's getting the chayas from the klippa, from the Sitra Achra, more than anyone else, because he's the one that's responsible for the chayas and the klippa and the Sitra Achra. The Daila Mavin. He says he doesn't want to elaborate on this. It is this person, this sinful individual, who's the one that's bringing down this flow of energy into the chambers, into the Hecholis of Sitra Achra. So he's the one who receives the greatest portion of that energy from the Hecholis of Sitra Achra, more than the other living creatures who also receive from there. It's the person who delivered it, who brought it, which is going to receive the most of it. And this is what our sages told us, it's not within our hands, meaning it's not something that we can understand, the shilvas and the tranquility that the Rishonim have. Why do good things happen to bad people? So they said, Ein b'yadeinu, we don't even be able to understand it. So the Alter Rebbe says, what's the significance over here? The word that the Gemara uses is b'yadeinu. Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Ein b'yadeinu davke. Kleimar, bizman ha'golos achar ha'churban, it's talking about in the time of Golos, after the destruction, where we, with our own hands, we are the ones that are responsible because the Golos happened because of us. And with our own hands, we gave the keys to Klippa and Sitra Achara and said, you're in charge. Every time, Chas v'sholem, a person transgresses the will of God, they're handing over with their own hands, b'yadeinu mamash, with their own hands, they're giving over the keys. Here, help yourself to as much godly energy as you want. Therefore, ein b'yadeinu, it's no longer in our hands, the tranquility of the tribe. So he's giving here an interesting insight into this Mishnah. The simple meaning of the Mishnah is that we don't understand why it is that the Rishonim are tranquil and living a good life. Here he's saying it's ein b'yadeinu. It's in our hands. He's telling us in our hands during Golos, it is in our hands the fact that the Rishonim are flourishing. That evil, not the wicked person, but that evil or that which is forbidden, the side of the world which is wrong, how does it flourish? That's certainly something that's a result of us being the supplier of energy for that side of life, for that side of the world.
Can I ask a question? Am I unmuted? Yeah. So, and therefore, if you're saying that when somebody does something bad, you switch off, kind of, yeah? So the other people are suffering also. So if a Rasha does something, yeah? And he switch off, you says, the conduit of...
switching, no, not switching off. Switching from receiving energy from Kedusha to receiving energy from Klippa.
Okay. So it doesn't mean that he's the only one suffering from this. I mean that everyone around him also?
Oh, okay. That's obvious. That on the one hand, yes, when I do something that I'm not supposed to be doing, it's not just affecting me, but it affects the whole world. No. Like the famous mashal that the Rebbe gives as well. If I'm sitting on the boat and I decide to make a hole under my seat, everyone's going to come down with me.
Right. Responsibility, in other words, like you know, you're responsible not just for your own well-being, kind of, but everybody else.
Which makes it so much more.
So how do we stop thinking? I mean, it's logical that if somebody does bad and he gets punished, right? That's more kind of the thing that we understand and we accept. But if someone does bad and everybody else also, it's a little bit like the same thing as what they say about, you know, the father does something wrong and then the children have to suffer so many generations, wherever. It's the same kind of idea that we can't quite grasp, right? That the suffering of a few people are based on ensuing a result of the sin of one person.
In nature, it makes very much sense. No one has that question. That if parents behave in a certain way and then the result will be detrimental to the children, everyone understands. It is wrong of the parents to have done that. But right? Your question is more, how comes the Eibush to run that way? So all of these type of questions, he's telling us here, we don't understand anymore. The Mishnah Pirkei Avos in the simple level is we don't understand anymore how the Eibush is running the world.
Okay, so let me put.
In other words, he's running it because he, as a result of our deeds, he's given it over. The Eibush's energy is now through Klippa, and that's who is in charge, so to speak. Of course, the Eibush is in charge. So we will have moments, we'll have times where the Eibush reveals and shows us directly that he's the boss. But on the main, we're getting it all through Klippa. So those questions are not really big questions as such, because it all goes through Klippa and anything can happen. But to go back to the point you're saying earlier, yes, on the one hand, we're not alone, and therefore whatever I do affects everybody. And therefore, but on the other hand, the reverse of that is when I do something good, then it'll have a very positive effect on everybody. And that's what the Rebbe explains. We're not waiting for everybody we need to have a movement of good in the world, of kedusha and holiness and positivity, and that's what will bring the world to a better situation. So that's actually happening already.
Remy, can I say that more than we affect everybody by doing the wrong thing, we affect the world itself. We balance the balance of the world with every wrong thing that we do becomes balanced toward every good. The same way as if everybody would just do good, the world would be elevated and lifted up like a balloon, right? You know, as the air goes out of it, it falls down because there's nothing good in it. It's when it's got the air in it, it goes up. So it lifts everything else up. The world itself becomes affected, and in return, therefore, people get affected. Is that more?
That's 100% true. That's 100% true. The world, in general terms, the Rebbe pointed this out many times, and that's 30 years ago. The world in general, in the last century, especially after the Second World War, the world is definitely moving in a direction of goodness. There's still evil in the world, but the majority is good. The majority of people are good people. The majority of Yidden, right? We're talking about mitzvahs. So the Rebbe points out that even people who I mean, we're digressing here completely to a whole different area, but even people who what they call themselves not frum, not observant, that's not really the real way of describing it. They're ignorant. They were never taught. They're not educated. How do we know that? Because you see a Yid, you show them a mitzvah, you want to share with them a mitzvah. They're very happy to share the mitzvah. Very few Yidden refuse to put on tefillin. Very few Yidden refuse to shake a lulav. Right? You share with them a mitzvah, give them a bit of education, and people are very happy. So in general, the side of kedusha is certainly getting stronger and stronger. That's one of the signs of Mashiach is coming. The point is, we don't have to wait for everybody. So as long as most people on the boat are not drilling holes under their seat, we're good. Right? And that the ones who do have holes are slowly, bit by bit, trying to patch up the holes, we're also good.
Hello?
Yeah.
Sorry. I think you're being very positive here because you're saying, people, yeah, totally. People who don't know, we're not from, yes, it's very easy. It's like writing on a blank page. You go and you tell them, do this, and they're very keen on doing it. That's a process that we had quite strong a few years ago. Now we have a different process, which is the other way around. You have a lot of frum people who are becoming less frum. And that's like a page that has already been written on, and you erase and you write on top, and it's not easy. So it's a lot easier to go and speak to someone with ignorance, that you say, that someone's been brought up from and decide it doesn't have anything to do with it. Or even if he's not completely fry, then his Yiddishkeit is very, very diluted. So him, you come and you want to educate, and he says, don't bother, I know all about it. I was brought up from. Don't bother with me, that's much, much harder. Now, if you can tell me how to reach these people, that will be a chidush, because to reach people one fruit is a lot easier.
It's a very good point, but that discussion is not for what we're discussing over here. So we're going to leave that. It's a good point. And it requires a discussion, but not today, because we're doing something else completely now. Different subject. We've digressed. I'm sorry. Okay, let's move on. We have another few. Oh, it's 11 o'clock. Okay. So we'll leave it up there for today. And we'll finish the chapter next week. We'll do a review of it, and we'll see where we're standing in this whole discussion.
Remy, can I just ask one question? Does it mean that the animal kingdom, for instance, is functioning on Klippas Noga totally?
An animal, other than next week's Parsha, where it says, and much discussion about it, that the animals became corrupt, as if they have free choice. Other than that, animals are all Klippas Nega. except the animals that are forbidden to be consumed. So that's shalosh klippos atmeis. A pig is not a bad animal. It's just forbidden for us. The whole
The klippos nega is not bad. It's not bad. It's not bad. It's
the
just
law, just as the laws of Tumah and Tara apply only to Yidden, they're not relevant for anybody else, right? Because Tumah and Tara is our degrees of kedusha and the lack of kedusha, but nothing else has kedusha, so therefore they don't have possibility of kedusha, so they don't have Tumah, right? So too it is regarding klippa and the shalosh, the three unclean klippas and klippas nega. Those are only relevant to Yidden. The pig itself is not a bad animal. It's just for Yidden, it's the shalosh klippas atmeis. For whatever reason, the Eibusha chose that that's not going to get its energy in a way of klippas nega. So yes, so all animals are in the category of klippa. Some are klippas nega, and some are klippas atmeis. Yeah.
yeah. And they survive.
Of course they survive. It's chayas from the Eibusha, so they
All
survive.
extinct. Some are extinct, but most of it's the law of the jungle, isn't it?
So to answer the question that someone asked earlier, so yes, in times of the Mikdash there was also klippa. That's how the cockroaches survived then too, in the mice and all the other non-kosher animals. That was some shalosh klippas atmeis. And the cows and the lamb and the sheep existed from klippas nega. That didn't change.
So it all existed, but it was in a different. It was revealed on a different level.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.